Hello everyone, welcome back to our AZ-500 Azure Security Technologies exam study series. In this video we will be talking about manage application access using Azure Active Directory. Okay, so when we say manage application access using Azure Active Directory, so let's just put AAD there. So what does it mean within the AZ-500 exam? So that means registering an application to your Azure AD tenant. So why do we need to register an application? Because the Microsoft Identity Platform or the Azure AD only manage identity and access if the application is registered. So this is specifically to build a trust relationship between the Azure AD identity platform and the application, whether be it a third-party application or your own custom-built application. Right, so what do we need to know about this registering application process? First thing is, what roles do you need to have in order to register an application? So first thing, you're gonna need an application administrator role. So that's the very common role that you can have in order to create an application. Another role you can have is a cloud application administrator. So I'm just going to put admin there. And then a application developer role. So application developer, I'm referring to the role, not the person, not the developer like person. So these are the roles that follows the concept of least privilege. Alright, so if you got asked in the exam, what are the permissions or roles required to register an application applying the least privilege concept, then it would be one of these roles. Because normally a global admin can do it, but that's just not it's not secure, it's not safe, like giving someone global admin just to register an application. Okay, so the next thing we need to know are, who are the users? So the users of the application. Right, so most of the time it will be obviously your company employees, or just probably users within your tenant. So this could be a your AD users. It could be, in some cases, some external users, or other cases are like users with personal Microsoft accounts. So why do we need to know this? I'm gonna show you on our next slide, or in Azure Portal, because these options are actually some of the it's important to know the scope of the usage of the application, because we need to set that within the registration of your application. Right, so another thing we need to know here is that there are two types of applications within your Azure AD tenant. This is the enterprise applications, and as you could see, app registered applications, app registration. These are actually the custom apps, so this is what we are going to create later on. Enterprise applications are they are also third-party apps, but they have a built-in configuration within the Azure AD. So built-in. I'm going to show that to you later on. Okay, so let's now move on to our Azure Portal. Okay, so we are now here in our Azure AD Portal. As you could see here on the left side that we just discussed earlier is that the enterprise applications are built-in applications that have a pre-configured registration within your Azure AD tenant. So if you just click on that add new application, you're gonna see these quite big names here. You got Adobe, Atlassian, got Salesforce here. So usually you would use this to set up single sign-on to that application, let's say in Salesforce. So you would use this kind of registration if you want the users within Salesforce use the Microsoft or your Azure AD account that are provided to your users. So you would use this kind of registration. But in this case, for this demo, we're gonna use a custom application. So in order to do that, we have to use the app registrations played on the left. Just click on that, and on the next page, just click or select new registration. Okay, so the first option you will be prompted, or the first thing you need to set, is the application name. So that could be anything because you can change it later. So this is like, alright, so I've named that my test AZ-500 app. And the next option you got here is who can use this application or access this API. So these are now, if you could remember earlier, the users that will be using this application or that will be authenticating to this application. So the options here are pretty straightforward. So you got directory only, so that's your single tenant. So only the users within your AD tenant will be able to use that application or this application. Next option you have here is any Azure AD Directory, Multi-Tenant. So that could be your AD tenant and then other organizations AD tenant as well. So this is probably allowing external users to access the application that you're creating. The next option you have is a combination of the multi-tenant Azure AD Directory and personal Microsoft accounts. So that's Skype, Xbox, or Hotmail accounts. So for this demo, we're just gonna select our directory only. So that's a single tenant application. They also call this as line of business applications. So if you've heard of that, that's a single tenant application. It's only accessible within your organization. The next option here is the redirect URI. So that's a unique resource identifier. Usually it would be a web URI, and it will be provided to you by the application developers. So this is actually where Azure AD will send that authentication request. Alright, so you can skip that for now because we don't have that for this application that we're creating. Once you click register, it will straight away create the application. Okay, now we are now here on the application page. For the AZ-500, there are just certain parts here that you need to know. So let's start with the certificate and secrets. So certificate and secrets, they are actually referred to as the application password. So certificates are public keys, in other words. So for you as an Azure engineer, you would just create this. So let's do that. Let's say, and you have to set the duration. Recommended is 6 months. Let's go to that, 6 months. Alright, so once you create that, you're gonna see here that the value is being displayed like as a full, like the whole of that value. So what you need to do is make sure to copy that, or copy that and paste it into a secure location, because once you refresh this page or once you navigate out of this page, it won't be visible anymore. So if I do that or refresh that, so as you can see here, the value has now been hidden. In the only way of fixing this, if you, let's say, misplace that the value, if you don't know what the value is, you just need to delete that and create a new client secret and give it to the developers. A certificate is pretty straightforward. Just upload your certificate that you want to use for your application, whether be it a self-signed certificate or a public signed certificate. So as I said, once you created this, it won't mean anything to you, but it will mean, really, it is important for the developers. They will use this to request identity tokens within Azure AD, and obviously to build that connection to your Azure AD tenant. Right, so now that you have the certificates, you will then need to expose the API of your application. So why do we need to expose the web API? So by exposing it to the client apps by adding example scopes, you are registering your web API and exposing it through scopes. You can provide permission-based access. So later on, that's going to be an API permission to its to your application resources to authorize users and clients. So in order to expose an API, you have to create an application ID URI. So this is very straightforward. Just click on set and Azure AD will create that for you. So just save that. I don't recommend actually creating your custom one, because I don't think that would be necessary. Now once you've done the ID URI, you will then need to add a scope. Alright, so when you add a scope, it will actually prompt you for a scope name. So the most common naming convention for the scope name is the resource. So you put in the resource there, then the operation and the constraint. So for this example, as we have it already here, is a file read. So that means the resource would be, the scope of this permission would be the files, and the operation would be read. So the files within your application or an API, and the operation will be read. Okay, so who can consent? That's pretty straightforward. Since it's only a read permission, I can allow users to consent themselves for this application. So I'm going to select admins and users. You will need to provide a name, so that's file read, and the description. So read files to my application, something like that. You can also set the state to enable and disabled. Now just click on add scope. Right, so as you can see here, we now have that scope here, that URI as well. So you will need to provide that to your application developers. Now since you've already exposed the API, the next thing you need to do is to set the permissions for that API. Okay, so that's pretty straightforward as well. Just click on add permission, select my APIs. So this is actually the application that we have created. Just select on that, and as you could see here, yeah, that's the file.read permission, that's the scope and the operation. So just select that and add permission. Okay, so that's now been delegated to the users. So that's a file.read permission. Okay, so that's application registration for AZ-500. Thank you for watching, and see you on the next one.